Ecology Action Center, which is an environmental nonprofit, which was established in Halifax in 1971. So it's been here for a while. The center provides leadership on critical environmental issues, from biodiversity protection to climate change to environmental justice. So Chris brings with him today communication. He's a communication professional and an environmental campaigner for at least 2 decades of experience. He was the sustainable city columnist for the Coast newspaper for a number of years, and he's authored 4 books. So you may recognize his name, Chris Benjamin. He has worked in NGOs, both in Halifax and in Toronto. Chris's work has strong education and community building components, including online and in-person workshops for training aspiring writers, informing grade school and seniors about the history and ongoing legacy of residential schools. Chris, we're happy to say, lives in Halifax with his partner. He has 2 children and an 80-pound lap dog, but he didn't bring the dog. Thank you, Chris, and welcome.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. And thanks so much for being here, either here or virtually here. It's a real thrill to get to present to you some of these concepts. The one thing that bio didn't have, I think, is my job title, which is Senior Energy Coordinator with Ecology Action Center, which means mainly that I run a number of efficiency programs, and I'm an advocate for better energy efficiency policy by the provincial government. You'll notice not in that description is giving workshops, and that's because I have an employee who does that, and she couldn't be here today. She's ill, so I'm standing in, and it won't surprise you to know that my employee knows much more about these things than I do. That's often the way. So I am going to give the presentation, and a portion of it is mine, but most of it is my employee Claire's. Unfortunately, you'll have to do with me today, but I'll do my best, and I hope you'll be patient. And I'll try not to drift too far into policy when I talk about these things. So see if I can get this working. Okay. So a quick rundown of what I wanted to talk about, just a bit of quick definition of energy efficiency, so we're all on the same page. And I should say, I do welcome questions, but if you could hold them to the end, I would appreciate it. I'll try to leave some time for questions. It'll be easier for me to stay with the flow, and there's a good chance I might answer your question in advance. So we want to talk about buildings as a system. Really, this is kind of a house efficiency science 101 is what I'm aiming to do today, and what makes a home efficient, and how you, as someone who lives in a home, can make it more efficient. And I'll talk a little bit about things you can access and ways you can go about that. But in a week, we're going to have Barry Walker from Efficiency Nova Scotia, who is truly an expert on how you can go about these things using programs from Efficiency Nova Scotia. So I won't get too deep into that because that'll be his domain. And then a little bit about just personal behaviors. Yeah. Hold that, Christine, just for a second. Thank you for your patience. Okay, you're back. All right. Thank you. God love the technical people. You keep us running smoothly. Yeah, what is energy efficiency? What do I mean by that? Well, the context, what we're using, I mean, as efficiency really means how efficiently you do a task. So how much comparing inputs to outputs. You want to maximize outputs while minimizing inputs. And with energy, obviously, it's that with energy. So a common example is the LED light bulb. Compared to the old light bulbs, they're far more efficiency. It takes far fewer inputs to get as good or better outputs with LEDs, and they save a lot of energy. In fact, they're 6 times more efficient. Heat pumps is another common one. I'll talk a bit more about those later because they're a big topic these days. Ruh-roh. I was told I could point this anywhere and it would. We're stuck. All right. Reasons to care. To me, the most important and obvious one is the last one on that list, to lower our environmental impacts. Many of us are experiencing eco-anxiety these days. In other words, anxiety around environmental crises, especially climate change, also habitat loss, biodiversity crises. That climate one is obviously clearly linked to our energy use. And the reason Ecology Action Center is involved in all this stuff is not because we're necessarily energy geeks by nature, but we obviously see the link between that and what is happening with climate chaos these days, wildfires, floods, and other calamities. And as you can tell by the name of the organization, Ecology Action Center, we often say action is our middle name. And that's because we believe action is really, it's the only way to change things. And it's also the only way to deal with that anxiety. You got to do something either in your personal life or in terms of advocacy or otherwise, sorry. So the other reasons listed there are things like comfort, health and air quality. Improving efficiency often improves the health of your home. Saving money is a big one, and a big reason why a lot of people get interested in this stuff this is especially relevant as well right now with the massively increasing cost of living that we're all going through right now. And then appliance longevity. You can extend the life of your appliances by being more efficiency. Although I will point out that these days, efficiency technology is advancing so rapidly that the efficient thing you buy now may very well be inefficient compared to what's available 5 years from now. So it's always something to consider. And I'll also talk a bit about embodied energy, which is the concept that there's two kinds of energy, basically operational energy. So how much energy do you use when you use a thing, versus embodied energy, how much energy goes into making the thing. And these are both important. Energy use, energy by end use. So I don't know how well folks in the room can make that out, but as you can see, hopefully see, the biggest use of energy in our homes is heating the space that we live in. These are Canadian statistics. So this is obviously a country that tends to be cold. There is a cooling element involved in all this too, particularly in Nova Scotia, though. We don't get that many hot days, at least not yet. That may be changing. It is changing already. But still the biggest source of energy use is trying to stay comfortable and warm during the winter. Some other big ones: water heating, appliances. Lighting is 4%. It's significant, but not one of the biggest ones. And what's kind of surprising is that most Canadians still use incandescent light bulbs, so they haven't really upgraded. And I'm not sure if that's true in Nova Scotia. I imagine it probably is if it's true in Canada. But Efficiency Nova Scotia actually will come to your house and replace old light bulbs with updated, more efficient ones for free. So there's really no reason not to make the switch at this point. There's all kinds of great supports, and you do save energy. As again, it's not the biggest source of energy, but it is significant. And then space cooling is at 3%. So I look at this, I'm not sure how much sense it all makes to people, but I think the most important piece of information to take away from this is that there are four systems that kind of work together in a home. And it applies as much to an apartment as it does to a house, which is depicted here, or a trailer, whatever kind of home you live in. but there's 4 systems that kind of have interplay and need to be balanced to maximize energy efficiency. So they are environment, and that is the broader environment, mechanical systems within your home. So these are things, it could be furnace, boiler, maybe heat pump, HVAC or air exchange systems, all these kind of mechanical systems that go into making your home function and be comfortable. And then the envelope, so that's the exterior of the building. And this gets into things like the kind of doors you have, the kind of walls you have, windows, the ceiling around different parts of them, and how well put together all that is. And then the occupants themselves. More people tends to be more energy used, but it also depends on their behaviors. I have a teenage boy. Our hot water use has increased a lot in recent years. My daughter will soon be teenaged as well, and I'm sure it will go up more. Long showers, lots of prep time, lots of activities going on. So the behavior of the occupants affects things and how careful they are about their energy use and energy savings. And what time of day they use things as well fits into that. So there's peak energy use, washing your clothes at night, things like that can help at least relax the pressure on our energy grid. What makes a home energy efficient? And again, number of factors are listed here. Airtight construction is really important. And in Nova Scotia, we tend to have a lot of older buildings. We have a pretty old building stock. So there's a lot of not airtight construction, a lot of cracks, a lot of areas where old materials are getting dated and may need to be replaced. Air sealing, particularly around windows, doors, electrical outlets, and vents. So that's something that needs to be upgraded periodically as well by the owners of buildings. High performing or Energy Star equipment. I'll talk a bit more about Energy Star later, but mainly we're talking about appliances here. So how old are the appliances? Are they energy efficient, or are they old ones? We, in my home, recently replaced an oven that I think was circa 1980 with a brand new one, and we've been amazed at how quickly it heats things. Like you can boil a kettle for tea in minutes, like less than a minute actually. Whereas the old one, it would be on for a long time. It would make a lot of noise in the process, clunk along, and then it just screamed inefficiency, and it took a long time. So it's a massive improvement. As I said, things are changing fast. Insulation is a big one. And again, a lot of older buildings, back in the day, they used to, like way back, they used to insulate with seaweed. A lot of that has fallen down and become basically nothing. So how well insulated, and when was it last insulated? Again, these things have to always be upgraded. And are there certain areas of the building that aren't well insulated? We see usually when we test for these things, we find areas lacking in the attic and basement. Did I get them all? Yeah. So those are kind of ventilation is mentioned, which I'll get into a bit more as well. And I wanted to talk, we use at EAC what's called the energy efficiency pyramid. And you can see this is a upside down triangle. You can see there's some pieces jotting out some text that's not quite in the box. That is not because Claire can't put together a slide. It's actually intentional to show that this is a very rough science at best. It's super loose, but what it is our way of understanding when we look at a building, how to prioritize actions. So what needs to happen first, second, third, et cetera. And you'll see way at the bottom is solar panels. Up at the top, an energy assessment. So that would usually be the first thing you would do ideally, is have someone do an energy assessment of your home. We have a lot of energy assessors in Nova Scotia. Per capita, we have one of the best rates of energy assessors in the province. They tend to get certified by Clean Foundation or Efficiency Nova Scotia, and they're available to come and look at your house, and they give you a written report with your prioritized area. So the cost for that varies depending, like you can get a full engineering report to a more one tailored to your home. But the idea is it helps you understand your home and where the energy waste is happening. So that's what we often recommend you do first. If you can manage that, in some cases you can access a free one, depending on your situation. Sometimes they do what's called an air blower test, which is where they seal off everything and they do it's like a burst of air, and they see where the leakage points are. And then light bulbs and air sealing is another easy one. Appliances and ceiling fans. Ceiling fans is mentioned because we work with churches a lot. Some homes this will apply to as well, but in a church hall, the ceiling fan is a big energy thing and also affects air circulation. So that's why I won't go more into it than that. Insulation and ventilation is a really important thing. And I think that any homes, that's probably a good place, an early place to begin as well. Windows are a little lower. Windows are important, but even the best insulated, triple glazed modern windows, it's just a natural air loss place in a building. So that's kind of a nice to have later on in the process for most people. The reason solar panels is so low is because if you don't do these other things first, and you have an inefficient energy system, then your energy demand is still high, whatever your source of energy. So again, and in our work with churches, we often find the first thing they want to get is solar panels. And they're like, oh, we saw this church in Dartmouth that had solar panels. It's beautiful. We want that. We want solar panels. And then our problems will be solved and we'll sell energy back to the grid. But if you still have all these other problems with poor insulation, poor ceiling, then the solar power won't be sufficient to power your building. So you need to reduce your overall energy demand to make the solar worthwhile. I didn't mention heat pumps in that. I mean, they'd probably fit in, I guess, I don't know, somewhere toward the top, mainly because they are so efficient and so affordable compared to other technologies, like compared to solar panels, for example, that in many cases, it make a lot of sense. I will say, again, I'll reference Claire, who went and did a workshop in Bodledek First Nation, which is in Unama'ki, Cape Breton. And she was told by the housing manager there that all the houses have heat pumps, but they're still paying in excess of $1,000 a month for energy in the winter. Why is that? Because they're not well insulated. The houses are not well built. And that's the federal government built them a while ago and they weren't well thought out. They weren't well constructed. That's a tragedy. Like that is offensive, I think. But also it's a lesson that how important it is to have these other factors. But heat pumps in a well insulated, well sealed home can make a world of difference. I got a heat pump several years ago, and I've noticed a decline in how much we still had the furnace. It's the backup. Last winter, I barely put it on at all. It's only really necessary in extremely cold days, like maybe -20. Again, probably due to climate change. We had very few of those last year. So the upside is I didn't have to use the furnace much. So this slide is called the end of oil because not because this has nothing to do with peak demand or peak supply of oil. It's just about the fact that Nova Scotia has decided to get off oil. And that means they're electrifying everything as much as possible. There's some controversy around this decision. Are we ready for it? It relies on importing some hydropower. There are challenges with that, both political and technical. But again, I promise not to get too far down the policy side. But part of that means electrifying everything. And people often ask me like, well, do heat pumps really make sense if you're still relying on coal environmentally to power the electricity? And the answer is yes, because they're so much more efficient than a furnace. The heat pump gives you like a 4-to-1 ratio of input output. So for every unit of energy you put in, you get the equivalent of 4 units of heat out of it. So they're incredibly efficient when heating. They're slightly less efficient when cooling, but they're still more efficient than your traditional air conditioning unit. And one of our projects that we're working on right now at EAC, there's a lot of discussion too about how cooling is becoming seen as a human right. As the climate changes, as things get warmer overall, we will have hot days, we will have wildfires at times. And the cooling effect, the dehumidification capability of these systems also makes for a much more comfortable. During the wildfires, we were able to close all our windows and keep them closed and use the dehumidifier part of the heat pump to remain comfortable. That's something that everybody deserves. I do, that is why we're like, I'm not usually one to go up and pump and hype a certain technology, but this innovation of heat pumps has been really effective. Often, if you don't, if you want to get rid of your furnace and replace it with the heat pump, there is usually need of some kind of backup system, whether it's space heaters, like baseboard heaters, or there's also space heaters themselves have become a lot more efficient. These oil systems, they don't burn oil. The oil is like a reservoir or a buffer. They use electricity as well, but they're far more efficient than they used to be. They're not nearly as good as a heat pump, but when it's too cold and you need the backup system, those units, which are widely available at retailers, are quite efficient as well. So again, proper sealing and insulation is really the key to pull these systems together, the mechanized systems, as well as the building envelope in the ceiling. So I want to talk a bit about efficiency one, just because they're a key part of this. And in this series of workshops, we'll have various experts come in. Brian Gifford is here, and he'll follow up me today talking a bit about energy poverty and low-income energy. And next week, we have Barry Walker from Efficiency Nova Scotia, and then in subsequent, we have other experts. But Efficiency Nova Scotia is a really important institution in this province. Ecology Action Centre is very proud to have been instrumental in the founding of it. Brendan Haley is my predecessor's predecessor. He was at Ecology Action Centre many years ago, and he advocated very hard for an efficiency utility. And that's something that's the equivalent of Nova Scotia Power, but instead of focused on selling us energy, focused on selling us energy efficiency and helping us achieve better energy efficiency so that we don't have to use as much energy. And Brian might talk a bit about the concept of bills, not rates. So the rate of energy, the cost we pay per unit of energy tends to go up. But that doesn't mean the bill has to go up. And the way to combat that is to reduce our overall energy use through efficiency. And that's what Efficiency Nova Scotia, or Efficiency One's mandate is. And Barry will take you through all their many, many programs on that, but they have supports that can help people of various income levels kind of access their services to assess their home and better insulate, better seal, and get heat pumps if that's appropriate, which it often is, and figure out better systems for their homes. So it supports lighting, HVAC, commercial upgrade, heating upgrades, and often heat pump projects. And there's more and more, particularly for low income homes, supports for that. So I wanted to talk, there's a I thought there was another slide, but I wanted to talk a bit about Ecology Action Center's own building. So we have an office. It's 2705 Fern Lane, which is between Roby Street and Agricola, and kind of north end. And by the way, you're welcome. You know, it's a very open space. And if you want to come and get the tour, you know, if people want to book that, I'm happy to give scans members the tour of the building as well. And I can show you some things I'm talking about in real time. But for now, I will just tell you a bit of the story, which is that Ecology Action Center bought this house, in 2005. The house was built in 1915. It's an old salt box house. It was 2 stories. It was a electrical workshop, actually, at the time they bought it. And they did a test on using the Energuide scale, which that's a scale out of 100. They don't really use it much anymore, but it was very convenient because it was out of 100. It was easy to remember. And that's a test of energy efficiency. So they tested how efficient is this? So it's all the stuff I'm talking about. How much energy does it use? How much is leaking and being wasted? How much are you heating the great outdoors, as Dad likes to say, versus heating the building you're aiming for? And we scored a 17 out of 100. I can tell you, like a math test, that's a terrible score. It's way below 50. And so EAC, they knew that something had to be done. They did a retrofit at the time, and they did bring it up above 50. But years later, 10 years later, in 2015, EAC had grown significantly. One reason they've grown a lot is because there's been so much attention paid to energy efficiency issues and climate change. There's been a lot of new funding and programming going into it. And so there was more and more staff, and there wasn't enough space for them anymore. So they realized they either had to get another building or expand the one they were in. And the problem with getting a brand new building is you lose all the embodied energy in the existing one, right? All the energy that went into building it, knocked down, it's done. So you can build a new one, but that's a lot of new energy going into building the thing. Even if you make it super efficient and operationally it doesn't use much, you've used tons and tons of energies to build the thing. Plus you're importing a lot of the material. Concrete is one of the great users of energy in production. So they didn't want to do that. So they decided, let's expand the building we have. So they built a 3rd floor right on top. They expanded space by 50%. And yet they managed to do that while decreasing the energy use by 65%. So it was an incredible improvement in the efficiency, which had already been improved in 2005. And it is now actually, we believe, the most energy efficient retrofitted office building in Canada. And it is the 3rd most efficient office building in Canada, period, even more than most newly built buildings. It uses about 3% of the energy of an average Canadian office building. So how do we do that? So we added the 3rd floor, as I mentioned, and changed the structure of the 1st floor. That was another change that had nothing to do with energy efficiency. It was to create more space and make it accessible, particularly wheelchair accessible. We had a staff person in a wheelchair at the time. Actually, Jen Powley, who recently passed away. Some of you may have heard of her. She was a great, wonderful activist. And we wanted to accommodate her and also any future staff who joined us. And so they would have access to a chairlift to get up to the lunchroom and a conference meeting room on the main area that would be easily accessible, as well as office space. So we did a lot of different efficiency upgrades. I can't get into them all, but mostly a lot more insulating. So we put about 5 inches of insulation right on the exterior of the building and built a new exterior over that. And that increased our value significantly. And then we also did a lot of refurbishing work, taking materials that was discarded from other sites. So we have in our lunchroom, there's a glass panel that separates it from the conference room. And you can see a big no smoking sign that's embroidered into it and painted into it. That is actually a Metro Transit bus stop that we refurbished because it was cut wrong and it was slightly irregular. And so they couldn't use it. And we said, well, that's a waste. Let's put it here. We'll use it. And so that's what we did. We resalvaged a lot of stuff from the old Roy building. You may remember that on Barrington Street. There was a lot of stuff coming out of that. Dow did a retrofit and they had provided a lot of materials. We have a coat rack that was made from bicycle handles that they gave us. They gave us an old kitchenette that we have in our upper floor. So a lot of this reuse of embodied energy. We also had just a very close scrutiny on every inch of the building to make sure it was properly sealed. And we had the advantage of having the lead architect on the project, Jordan Willett. His office, well, let's say EAC was here, his office was here and his home was here. So he walked by every morning and he'd look up and he'd be like, you missed a spot right over there. And so the workers would go over and address that. And he did that on the way back and the way in, and just meticulous attention to detail. And we involved 1,000, literally 1,000 people as volunteers who put in well over 1,800 hours collectively. There was a donation made of old cutouts from metal frame doors. So if you kind of picture an industrial door, the way they do that, they insulate it, they put the metal on, they put the window in, and they put the metal on the whole thing and they cut open an opening for the window and they put the window there. The thing they cut out is already insulated and they throw it in the landfill. And we heard about this and we reached out to a company and they were happy to give it to us because it saved them the tipping fees of sending it to the dump. They have to pay to put it in the dump. And so our volunteers pulled those apart and pulled out the insulation and we use that insulation. Again, saving it from the landfill. So that's the kind of per TLC, I would say, that that can result in this level of energy efficiency. We also used all natural paints, locally made. They're clay-based. Kim Thompson is the artisan, I'll say, who makes those. But the recipe is very simple. It's like flour and clay and a bit of minerals for color. And you can look it up if you're interested. And it's no VOC, there's no emissions, so they're good, better for your health. So we don't all have to sit in that all day as staff. Yeah, so and all the seams of the membrane. So a building has a membrane. It's like the skin of the building, and if you can think of it that way, all taped with the UV resistant and proper vapor barriers. Moisture is an important thing that builders always consider when they're working on buildings, especially in this climate. You have to eliminate moisture because your goal, intuitive, we think, oh, a building has to breathe, but really you want to minimize that because you don't want to be leaking buildings, but that means you have to prevent moisture. So you can do that through various means. So that's a big concern always for builders. If you're employing builders, ask them about moisture. What are you doing about the moisture? This isn't going to be moist, is it? I want no moisture in this building. So that's something to consider as well. But we focused a lot on air exchanges, and the way they measure it is they do air exchanges per hour in a building. The old building, even after the 2005 renovation, had 7.7 air exchanges per hour. That's pretty high. We figured we could get it down to 3.5. We ended up reaching 1.4. And that's, again, this meticulous sealing of the building. The R2000 standard, which is kind of like the global green building standard, is 1.5. So we're actually better than that. So that's all. And the reason I tell you that story is not because I expect you to all go home and do this to your own homes. It's more things to be aware of, things like the seal, the insulation. And when you're working with builders who likely most people will employ when they're doing renovations for the purpose of energy efficiency, things to talk to them about, things to be aware of if you want to be engaged in that conversation and understand what's happening to your home. So I said I'd mention more about Energy Star, and again, a bit of a plug. It's an independent standard that manufacturers have to adhere to if they want to get the label. It's really the only really trustworthy one out there. So if you're looking for the most energy efficiency appliances, Energy Star is generally what you go for. When I work with churches, I work a lot with the United Church, which has a goal of reducing its energy footprint by 80% nationwide by 2030. And so they're giving money to their congregations to do retrofits. I don't believe this one has been done yet, has gone through that program yet. I hope they will. But anyway, we always encourage, not encourage, we tell them you have to get any new appliances, you have to get Energy Star to qualify for that funding. It's required. So that's pretty common. And yeah, that's, preferred partner. I should mention that. So this relates again to Efficiency Nova Scotia. They have what's called the Preferred Partner Network, which is basically pre-vetted contractors and workers that they trust and that have to meet a certain standard to achieve, to be part of the Preferred Partner Network. It's on their website. If you go to Efficiency's website, you can find, just click on Preferred Partner Network, and there's a map, and you can choose your area, and you can get a list of who's in your area that is trustworthy and familiar with this kind of work. So that's really handy. And again, in all our work, we encourage people to use that network. For the churches we work with, they aren't required to use the Preferred Partner Network. We just tell them, why wouldn't you, when they've been pre-vetted and it's just a level of control that and protection for you. The reason some of them don't is because, like, there's a guy in the congregation, Larry, the retired electrician, and he'll do it for free, and you can't beat that price, so that's understandable. This next bit kind of gets into the home dweller's behavior, as it were, and part of the behavior, it's not just turn the light off when you leave the room. That stuff's important too. But when you're dealing with the mechanics of energy efficiency, whether it's heat pumps or HRVs, which are heat recovery ventilators, which are basically any home built from 2011 on in Nova Scotia has to have these, an HRV system. If you have an older home than that, you might not have one. But it is a good idea when you're improving your building seal and your insulation and doing all this stuff to have it. And what it is that the heat that does get out of the building, it reuses it, and it keeps the system circulating so that less is wasted and less is lost. And both heat pumps and HRVs require a little bit of regular maintenance that anybody can do. It's really just as simple as cleaning a filter. My colleague at another colleague, not clear, at Ecology Action Center told me a story. I won't say my colleague's name because they were a little embarrassed when they told me this, but they had a heat pump for years, and each year it seemed to get less effective. And they were like, I'm not sure this was actually worth the money. I've heard so much hoopla about these things. It's not giving enough warmth. What is the problem? And they started Googling, and they called the company that installed it, and they said, well, have you cleaned the filter? And they had it for 2 years and did not clean the filter. And you should probably clean it at the very least every other month, ideally every other week. And it's simple. It's something you can pull out, and you run under the faucet under lukewarm water with a rag, and you clean it out. And that just keeps the air flowing smoothly. And the HRV, it's not quite as simple, but it's close. Step one, turn off your HRV. Fingers can be lost if you don't do that. And you want to take out the filters again every 1 to 3 months and vacuum them and wash in warm soapy water and then leave to dry and slide them back in. My house is much older than 2011, so I don't have an HRV. So, and then clean the energy core once a year, which is something you can have the company that installs it will often provide that service for you for a small fee. But it's also something that can be done by the homeowner. Yeah, so this mentions annual servicing, and then the owner's manual usually has all this information in as well. But it's amazing how often people will get these things installed. And we hear from them sometimes, oh, I did this and it doesn't help at all. You guys, what are you talking about? This is not better efficiency. I'm not saving any money at all. And it's often a question of maintenance and just taking care of them. But it's also, again, how these systems relate to the other systems in your house, the ceiling, the insulation, et cetera. And then I already mentioned this, heat pump maintenance is quite simple. We also have ours serviced once a year, and that's just a proper cleaning. They come, it takes about half an hour, and I think they charge us $100 or something like that to do that. Air sealing, this I mentioned as it has to be done on occasion. I don't know how, like every so many years, and it depends on the house and the wear and tear on it. And again, how many people live there? What do they act like? How do they treat the house? Are there pets? All this stuff. But it's basically sealing, caulking, and weather stripping. And it's a very inexpensive way to significantly improve the efficiency of your home. And these two resources that are listed there, you can Google them. I believe they're online, and you can get them ordered by mail if you want them in print. And that's NRCan, which is Natural Resources Canada, federal government agency. They have a guide called Keeping the Heat In that can help you walk you through the steps of keeping a well-sealed home. And then Manitoba Hydro, although it's Manitoba, it's the same here. Sealing, caulking, and weather stripping. So a couple of useful guides. I'll let some people in the room, for those online, are snapping photos and taking notes. So I'll let them finish that before yeah.
We're originally from Winnipeg, so
Oh, there you go. Well, we thank you for your guides. And then, yeah, Claire here just has a few, like the low flow shower head. Again, Efficiency Nova Scotia will actually install these for you free of charge. You can save up to $100 a year on your water heating. And then the smart thermostat is really cool, kind of new tech that can just, by regulating the temperature of your home and automatically lowering it at night and then getting it to a comfortable room temperature when you're awake. You can save significant, because even if you're pretty good about that, everybody forgets sometimes. So you can save significant money that way. And then the bottom one is a smart power bar, which just and there's a concept called energy vampires, which is like all the little outlets in your home. They suck a little. They're a little inefficient, and stuff is heating air is just wasted. There's little plugs you can buy. If you don't have something plugged in, you can just plug an empty plug. I think those are at the dollar store or whatever. But this device just is an automatic, turns off anything not being used or seals it up. Smart devices like that. One I have that I got recently for our heat pump is there's an app you can do with your iPhone called MYSA, which is MYSA, and then you get a device that comes with that that you can buy, and it allows you to pre-program it from anywhere. My wife was away last week, and I kept, I would have it off, and then because of the temperature was fine. And then in the morning I'd wake up and the AC was on, and I was like, what is going on? And I finally texted her and I was like, are you pranking me from Toronto? What's going on? She's like, kind of, I didn't realize it, but she had preset it to come on when it was still hot in the summer, and she hadn't changed it. And usually she's the one who's up first in the morning, so she would just turn it off, but she forgot all about that. So anyway, it's not supposed to work that way. It's supposed to actually save you having the thing come on when you don't want it on, and you can preset it to turn off at night or to lower at night or whatever, and you can do all these things. It's a really cool, and you can do it from wherever you are. And if you go off on vacation and realize, oh, I forgot to turn the heat pump off, you can do that from wherever. And the reason I got that, by the way, is because I signed on to a Halifax new program called the Navigator program, which is they're doing a pilot program. So it's only 50 people, and I think it's full now, where they help you do all that you can for your home. So all this stuff, they have a project manager who's assigned to you and works with you, and they have an auditor come and do an energy assessment in your home, and they work you through the process, and they loan you the money interest-free to do any of the upgrades you need to do. And it's similar to the way their Solar City program, which was solar panels for hot water, worked, which we did on our home too. And they loaned us the money to put the solar panels, and we pay back over a 10-year period, one payment a year, no interest ever. So it's an affordable way to do it. It's a similar thing, but it's for deep energy retrofits in your home. And when I signed up for that, they connected me to the efficiency people who sent someone to my home, and he just put in a low flow shower head, and he put in the MISA heat pump system and all this stuff, and replaced a couple light bulbs. Most of mine were up to date, but a couple weren't. So that was great. And again, you can, so watch for that Navigator program, because they're hoping to roll that out next year. But in the meantime, you can call Efficiency Nova Scotia or an organization called Think Well Shift. So Think, WELL Shift. And they do education around energy efficiency as well. So they're involved in that too. Oh, and this is the one slide of Claire's I'm not a fan of. Too much text. But it's just, I mean, this is just, gets to user behavior, owner behavior of your the people in your home. Practice good efficiency. A big one is adjusting your thermostat at night. Probably if you turn it down to 15, you can still have a comfortable sleep, and turn it up. There's kind of a myth that, oh, just keep it high all the time and that's more efficient. And no, actually, if you turn it down to 15, that will save you oil on, if it's an oil furnace, or coal if you're on a electric system. And of course, turn out the lights when you leave the room, and turn things off when you're not used to it. Fixing leaky faucets is a big, you don't think of that as an energy use, but all the water is energy because it's often heated. Cleaning your light fixtures, just dusting, things like that. But I won't go through all these. This collectively adds up to, I'll call it significant, but not the biggest thing. So as I said, going back to that earlier slide of where our energy use is, the vast majority of our energy use in the home is heating the space, keeping us warm and comfortable. And one of the best ways to deal with that is the heat pump, but coupled with better insulation, getting an assessment of your home is great. You can also do your own inspection of your home. I mean, if you can get up to the attic and look around and see how the insulation, you often will find, like, you'll find there's a place where it's kind of fallen down or gotten old. And in the basement, look through the walls and in the crevices and where the cracks are, and you can get a sense of, like, okay, I think we need to upgrade the insulation in this. That's a very common thing. So better insulation, better sealing, caulking, and then heat pumps are generally a good thing to consider. As I said, Barry Walker will be here next week to talk more about how to access the programs to give financial supports to help pay for this stuff. So that's what I wanted to say. And I think there's a break coming, and then Brian, but certainly welcome questions if there are any questions. Yes.
Something as simple in a second bedroom that's rarely used, unplugging the side lamps. Or if they're plugged in and not turned on.
I think just keeping them off is probably
Yeah.
sufficient. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we tend to, I mean, it's just, we're humans living our lives and we forget these things sometimes, but being conscious of things like that and kind of doing a walkthrough and seeing where you use things. I do this I talk about these things for a living and I still forget to clean my heat pump, and it'll occur to me, oh, right. 3 months ago I did that. I should do that. And we have little, remember to clean your HRV filter magnets that go on people's fridges, because it helps to have little reminders. Put it in your calendar. I live off my phone these days, so it does remind me, periodically clean the heat pump filter. So
On
Yeah.
that note, oh, golly. On that note, our little heat pump filter is just a little kind of concertina, little gauzy thing. And when we called Sunshine Renewable Energy,
Mhm.
I said, can I get more filters? And she said, no, you should be okay. Just keep cleaning these ones. How often should they actually be replaced?
Well, I mean, I think the life of a heat pump is like 10 to 15 years or something like that. So I do think they're designed to be for the life of the product, as far as I know. Yeah. And again, just taking good care of them, unless they get a tear in them or something. But yeah.
I live in an older house, central Halifax, and I don't know, 25 years ago or more, had I think it was fiberglass blown into the walls from the exterior. I don't know whether before that, whether there was any sort of thermal scanning of the wall done, or more important, is it something that is used now to assess the kind of current state of insulation in a wall?
Sorry, is thermal scanning
Thermal
used?
scanning. If you look at the envelope from the outside and you see linear
Yeah.
cool areas, linear
Yeah,
warm areas, you have some idea of how of the quality of the current quality of your
Mhm.
insulation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, but I mean, I don't know that you need to go to that extent or need that technology to assess. I mean, I think a lot of people do, and again, like working with churches, a lot of them we have a do-it-yourself kit, audit kit that we give to the churches, and a lot of it is just the eye test, which is usually sufficient. I mean, I can see the advantage of that. You probably would find areas that might not be obvious. I just don't know that it's needed for the average person. Speaking of which, though, and I'm happy to send for scans that church kit. It's still useful probably for just a house or whatever, if that's of interest to people. I don't know.
I have a refrigerator that's not that many years old, but it's always been humming and making noises. And at night I'm in bed and I hear the refrigerator. It seems to be humming more and more. Would that mean that might be a problem with the filter? Like every night I just hear the refrigerator humming. And I know somebody else who has a rather new refrigerator that also does a lot of humming. Is that something to worry about, or is it just how they're built?
I must say that's a little above my knowledge, sir. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I don't know refrigerators very well, other than I would say if it's only a few years old, I wouldn't think it wouldn't be my first thing to worry about the efficiency of it. But I mean, the challenge, do you want to say something?
Well, I think a lot of most refrigerators have a cycle in the freezer where in order to defrost it, it turns on a fan.
Yeah.
And that's probably the humming you're hearing. And I think it is a fairly normal part of the way a fridge operates.
Yeah, I will say it's we often talk about planned obsolescence at EAC, and it's frustrating when it's so hard to get these things looked at these days. And we luckily found a guy who's like an appliance guy, who just anytime any of our appliances aren't working, he'll come fix it. But it's like, I just need somewhere. I wish I had a hotline to call with questions like that. Like, I think my appliance is humming. Is it supposed to be doing that? I'd like to know that. But I mean, I think Brian's right. I think sometimes it doesn't worry me what you're saying, but I wouldn't want to be held at my word for that either, because it's a little beyond my expertise.
Installation to heat pumps. And so how about if you live in a place like we do, a townhouse, which is part of a condominium corporation, and you don't have that control over insulation? We've grappled with getting a heat pump, and we are on the list for an appointment to have an assessment done. So we'd like to participate in the programs, the provincial program. So what's the verdict on getting a heat pump when you can't really do any more with insulation in the place? It's beyond your control, because they look after the exterior of the building.
Yeah.
And the
So
structure.
is your question about the access, like
No,
who
what's
controls?
what do you recommend around getting a heat pump when you can't insulate to make it more efficient?
My guess in most cases, I think it is worth it. But as I said, like I pointed out that one example, if the insulation is really bad, I mean, whatever your system, you're likely wasting energy. But the heat pump is still probably, I mean, what's the current source of heat?
Electric based.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an upgrade over that for sure. It's just, it would be better with full insulation, right? For sure, but it's still likely an improvement over that. And I think Brian will probably talk a bit about that. We talk a lot about renters, which is a bit different than co-op owners, but there's this called the split incentive dilemma, which is that what motivates a landlord to do something is different than what motivates a tenant to do something. So co-op, like the condo model is a bit different, and then there's the co-op model as well. So there's all kinds of different models of ownership and stuff, and they each have their own kind of politics around them, if I can call it that, like ways of figuring out who's responsible for paying for this stuff. So that is an interesting question. I think it does apply a lot to renters, and it's a challenge, but it's like trying to get the owner of the building to take responsibility as much as possible.
Yeah. Are the R2000 standards the same today as they would have been when we built our R2000 home in 1991? Or have they changed over time?
They evolve. I mean, I think if it's certified, it's usually certified, but it's the thing is they do evolve, and what it takes to get certified changes. But also, there's R2000, and then there's LEED and all this stuff. And then I think one of our presenters is going to talk about zero carbon buildings, which is a whole new standard that accounts for embodied energy. So, and I guess in terms of a practical answer for that is, if it was certified as high efficiency years ago, it's always worth thinking about what else can we do, what has changed, and how have the standards changed in technologies, and like what's efficient now won't be efficient in 10 years, right? Things do change, and so it's always good to kind of keep consulting the new information as it comes out and keep an eye on things. Yeah. Okay. What's that? 10-minute break? All right. Thank you so much.
I'll start. So my name is Brian Gifford, and I'm a volunteer with the Ecology Action Center and also with the Affordable Energy Coalition. And I retired in 2010, so I'm like many of you, retired and a senior. And I've been volunteering with the Affordable Energy Coalition for over 10 years. And it's been very rewarding, and I'm really happy to talk about it. And I think that the SCAN system is really marvelous. I've been to a couple of events that have been sponsored by SCANs, and the technological support you have is also marvelous. And I appreciate both the Ecology Action Center and SCANs for putting this on. I think it's a really important topic, and I'm very happy to be part of the presentation this afternoon. So the Affordable Energy Coalition, just let me get the technology right. Aha. I'm not getting it to change. There we go. Okay. Yeah.
You can keep talking.
Okay. So the first thing I wanted to do is start with a survey, and then I'll give you an overview of what the Affordable Energy Coalition has been doing for the last 20 years. And then I'll talk about some really big changes that have happened in the last year. And then I'll go into some detail about the 3 areas of advocacy that we've done, and then I'll end up with some efficiency Nova Scotia programs. And as Chris said, I'm not going to go into much detail about the efficiency Nova Scotia programs because they will be here next week. So for the survey, I did pass around a detailed survey that hopefully everyone has been able to fill out if they're willing to. On the front side, it's homeowners, and on the back side is renters. So there's a separate one for each one of you. But I'd like to just get a show of hands of how many people are homeowners. All right, it looks like everybody. Are there any renters? Aha, okay, good. Great. And for the homeowners, what's your heating fuel? How many of you heat with electricity? A small number, I'd say about a quarter. How many heat with oil? The majority. And how many heat with heat pumps, which is electricity as well? Okay, well, that's good to see. It's quite a range. And how many of you have already used Efficiency Nova Scotia programs? How many of you have had the free installs where you get your lights changed over to LED lights? That's about half, it looks like, or maybe a third. So as Chris said, that's something that's available to everybody. So if you haven't done that yet and you still have a number of light bulbs that are old, you can get them changed for free, as well as some other items in your house. And how about the Efficiency Nova Scotia's, what's the other program called? It's the their green energy program, where you get the assessment that Chris was talking about, and then there are various incentives for making changes. Has anybody done that? Few people have. Yeah, good. Okay, so you're very familiar with what the possibilities are. And for the renters, how many of you pay for your own electricity or heat? All right, so it's important for you to take steps where you can. And for the renters, have any of you had the free installation of LED bulbs yet? Okay, one of the 3 or 4 has. Okay, one of the 4 has. So that's something you can do in your apartment building. They will come in and change all of your light bulbs to LED light bulbs and make some other changes like a low flow shower head and so on. So that's something I would recommend that you do. It's one of the few things a renter can do directly without going through their landlord, and it helps. It's not as substantial as the kind of thing homeowners can get, but it is helpful. How many of you had trouble paying your energy bills last year? Nobody. You're a lucky group. Because a lot of people did. And did anybody here use the heating assistance rebate program last year? One person, okay. And the any other programs like the Salvation Army's Heat Fund? Anybody? Or the Seniors Care Grant? Okay, it's great to know. I'm talking about people who are not in your situation. Like our group is focused on low and modest income households who have a lot of trouble affording their energy bills. They get into trouble in various ways, and including at the worst, having disconnections of their power. But before they get disconnected, there's all kinds of other trouble that they can run into, just trying to make ends meet and balancing different bills for different essentials like food, heat, rent. Because of the problems that people at the low income end of the income scale have with energy, the members of our coalition formed a coalition over 20 years ago in order to help people with those problems so that they would be able to get this essential service of energy without having to fear getting it cut off and without having to balance energy bills with food bills and so on. So over 20 years ago, a number of groups got together and formed the coalition, and they had three goals. One of them was to create low-income or advocate for low-income efficiency programs. The second one was to advocate for a universal service program, which I'll describe later. That's basically subsidizing people's bills until their bills get reduced by energy efficiency. And then we've also worked with Nova Scotia Power on better collection systems, so that is to make it less likely that people will have their electricity cut off. And then we have had some results over the years, mostly in the efficiency programs, and I'll talk a bit about that. So Nova Scotia has some very, very good low-income efficiency programs, and we've also had some improvements in Nova Scotia Power's collection methods. But we haven't got very far with a subsidy program, a universal service program type of program that we've been advocating for. But this year, there's more possibility of a change happening at that level than there ever has been in the 20 years we've been around. So this last year was a really big year in energy issues. Oil prices went through the roof because of the Ukraine war and other international issues. Fossil fuel prices have been volatile for a long, long time. And like all through the 2000s, fossil fuel prices, oil prices in Nova Scotia went up enormously. Power prices went up too, but oil prices went up more quickly. And in the last year, they went up to over $2 a liter for home heating oil for parts of the winter. And people were really, really in trouble. Another thing that happened in the last year was that every 3 years, Efficiency Nova Scotia negotiates a contract for selling efficiency services to Nova Scotia Power, and there was a new 3-year contract which was approved last year, and we were involved in the advocacy during that negotiation. And they expanded the proportion of first the total amount in the contract, total cost, the value of the services that they were selling to Nova Scotia, but also a very big expansion in the amount of money spent on low-income programs. So we were really happy with the outcome of that. And then there were 2 new laws. Yes, in response to the rate hearings that happened with the Nova Scotia rate hearing. Sorry, that I didn't make that a separate point, so I didn't talk about it separately. But there was also a rate hearing for Nova Scotia Power that you probably heard about because it was in the news a lot. That was in September or so, and then they announced the increase so that in January, and it came into effect in January. They announced it sometime later in the fall, and it came into effect in January. And so there was a huge amount of controversy about the rate increase for Nova Scotia Power. And the province, in response to that, introduced 2 new laws, changing the law that regulates how Nova Scotia Power works. And we responded to those legal changes. There's a process. Is everybody familiar with the Law Amendments Committee? Know what that is? I see one or two people nodding, but it sounds like most people don't. Okay, so when in Nova Scotia has a really very nice feature that most provinces don't, that when there's a new law being proposed, before it gets passed, there's a public process where a committee of the legislature called the Law Amendments Committee holds a hearing, and anybody who's interested in the issue can come and speak at it. It's a really good democratic process. Unfortunately, it has almost no effect usually. So people come and talk and make recommendations about changing the bill, and it's very rare that the government listens to them. But the fact that they can speak to it is a very good public process, gets the issues out into the open, and it's a much more public thing than just debating it in the legislature. So it's really smart. So unfortunately, like I said, it doesn't have as much impact as we'd like. So these two new laws were talking in some respects about making some changes for low-income households. And our group went to the Law Amendments Committee and said, look, you can't really have an impact on low-income rates unless you change another part of the law that you're not changing, which is a thing called Section 67, which says that that every customer of Nova Scotia Power has to get the same rate, that you can't vary it based on income. So we've been trying for years to get that part of the law changed so you could have a special rate for low-income households, but the government wasn't willing to go along with that last year. So the other thing that happened last year that was really big was the heating assistance rebate program, which is normally up to $200 per household, and had a cap of $20,000 or so, $20,000 to $25,000 for individuals and $45,000 for families, was expanded enormously. It went from $200 to $1,000, and the income cap went up to $85,000. So that was a big, big positive change for people who were struggling with their energy bills last year. And then the federal government also announced a whole bunch of money for people to change their heating systems to heat pumps by having heat pumps. So that was very helpful. And some of that was for free heat pumps for low-income households. From our point of view, that was a very good change last year. So I guess I've already, this is our response to what was happening last year, and I've already talked about some of it. So I'll just very quickly go. So we supported the big increase in low-income efficiency programming in the 3-year contract. We went to the Law Amendments Committee twice and argued for changing this Section 67. And as a result of the Nova Scotia Power rate hearing, we asked for and got the UARB, which is the regulatory body, to set up a process where we would negotiate with the consumer advocate and Nova Scotia Power to look at what's happened with collection processes that were changed back in 2013, as we had requested back then, and see what the effect has been and to see if we could get any improvements. And so that's been happening for the last year, which we were very happy about. And there's going to be an annual report now, a new annual report on energy poverty and on disconnections and how many people are in arrears and that kind of thing. So that'll be very helpful for monitoring what's happening with low-income households. And then the most recent thing is that we managed to get a couple of government departments to support the idea that we were proposing all through the last year of setting up a working group of various experts, including Ecology Action Center and us, the Clean Foundation, and Efficiency Nova Scotia Power, and these and 3 government departments are all participating in this working group, and we're looking at what are the options that we could recommend to the government for a made in Nova Scotia systematic energy bill reduction for low-income households. So it's been a very busy year for us and a very exciting year. So as I said, our first goal in the last 20 years has been to advocate for low-income efficiency programs. One of the best results of that has been what's now called the home warming program, It's a program. How many of you heard of the home warming program? One or two? Okay, 3 or 4. Okay. And Chris has heard of it. Yay. Yeah, he's certainly knows a lot about it. So that's for low-income homeowners. The pilot started in 2007. It's gone through various name changes and slight changes in the rules, but over 24,000 low-income homes have been insulated under this program. It's an excellent program. It's probably the leading low-income program for efficiency in Canada. And what they do for somebody who qualifies for at the income level that they have established, they will go into a home, do an energy assessment, like Chris was saying, that's the first step. And they will make recommendations about what should be changed. The homeowner then looks at that and signs off on the recommendations if they agree to. And then they're all done for free. So they get the insulation. Very occasionally they used to get heat pumps, but that was rare, but they would get air sealing and insulation for sure, and occasionally some other smaller changes, but these are big changes, and they have saved the families that had these upgrades happen an average of $600, I think it's $600 a year for electrically heated homes and $900 a year for oil heated homes. So it's made a big difference to low-income households. The really nice thing about that program that's happened in the last year, like a standard for deep energy retrofits is you save 50% of what your energy cost used to be. The home warming program was saving in the order of 30% of people's bills. In the last year, they've added heat pumps to that program, and that's boosted the savings up to over 50%. So I was at another hearing last Tuesday morning, and the head of Efficiency Nova Scotia was presenting at that, and he said the average savings are now $1,800 a year for low-income households when you include the heat pump and the other insulation and other elements that they install. And also when you take into account that the savings are actually higher than they were a few years ago when they did the averages, because prices have been going up. So what you save is actually more. So $1,800 a year is very significant. Efficiency at that scale has the potential to eliminate energy poverty for those households. Which reminds me, I should go back to what energy poverty is defined as. So I probably should have started off with that, but energy poverty is, people are considered to be in energy poverty when they spend over 6% of their household income on their energy bills. And Nova Scotia has the highest rate of energy poverty in the country, or certainly one of the highest rates. There's a national study a few years ago. This is using Statistics Canada information, so it's always a little bit out of date, but it showed that 37% of Nova Scotians were in energy poverty, which is very high. Some of those people that fall into that definition actually have a high enough income that we don't think that they should perhaps be included in that figure. But anyway, the figure is high. It's certainly over 30%, and 37% is a widely used figure. So if we can, through efficiency, can eliminate energy poverty for some of those people who are paying those kinds of bills, it's very significant for those households. The other program that we advocated for was a rental program, because a lot of lower income households live in rental properties. They rent. Some of them, their energy costs are part of their rent, but a lot of them pay their own bills, the same as a few people in the room today. So Efficiency Nova Scotia set up at our request and with advocacy over several years and going through several steps, they set up a program called the Affordable Multifamily Housing Program for low rent landlords and for shelters. This is an important step forward. They've upgraded a number of rental properties. It's, as Chris was saying, it's a more complicated setup because the landlord owns the building, the tenant pays the energy costs. So if the landlord puts money into improving the building, the tenant gets the benefit if the tenant is the one paying. For the landlords where they do pay for their own energy costs, it's a more straightforward thing. It makes sense for them to put the money into reducing their energy costs. So it is a more complicated. There's also, like, homes are, there's a lot of different shapes of homes, but they're basically the same kind of structure. Individual homes are, but rental properties, as you can imagine, are a way wider variety of shapes and sizes. So, for instance, big high rises, low rises, 4-story, 4-unit buildings, even single properties that are rented out. They're more similar to a homeowner home, but because of that variety of building types and heating systems, the rental program is a more difficult program to design and to make effective. The other element that makes it difficult is that we were very keen, especially in this time of housing crisis, not to see the government subsidize landlords to put in efficiency measures and upgrade their buildings, and then have their tenants rent evicted because the government had just subsidized them to make the buildings a whole lot better. That didn't make any sense. So as a result, there's a condition when landlords sign on to the affordable multifamily program that they cap their rent increases to the consumer price index for 12 years. So a lot of landlords, given the hot housing market that there is right now, and the fact that that many landlords want to be able to resell or to increase their rents as much as possible in this hot market, have been reluctant to join the program. So there's a lot of challenges like that to make this program work, but there have been a number of landlords that have participated, and it's helped a lot of tenants and landlords keep their rents affordable. So that's where we've been most effective, is on efficiency programs. So the second big element that we've been advocating for is what we call a universal service program. And that's based on an American system that's used in many regulated utilities, especially in the northeastern US, but in other parts of the US. So it exists there, but doesn't exist in Canada, except for one exception, which I'll go into later. So that has 4 parts to it. One of them is energy credits on people's bills, so that, let's say, if their bill was $100 in a particular month, and a $60 bill brought their energy costs down to 6% of their income, then they would have a $40 credit on their bill. And usually that's set up so that they pay the same amount. It's a equal billing throughout the year. So that's when you're enrolled in the program, that's the way it would work. You get these equal bills all throughout the year, and they would be reduced so that you wouldn't be paying more than 60% of your income on your energy. But that can work with electricity, which is what these American programs generally are for. In Nova Scotia, where we've got so many people heating with oil, that isn't part of this program generally, or hasn't been in the US. And then there's 3 other elements to it. One of them is efficiency, which we do have here. There's also a way of, when people get into trouble with their arrears, making sure that the repayment program is something they can actually afford. And then there's also emergency relief, which is something we do have now with the Salvation Army heat program. So that's what the Universal Service Program is, the sort of classic one from the US. Ontario has a modified version of that. It's called the Ontario Electricity Support Program. It's also on their bills. It's not based on, this sort of classic one is based on income and family size, or income and energy use. But the Ontario one is based on household income and household size, not energy use. So it's a little, it doesn't get your cost down to 6% of your income. But it is an enormous help for low-income households. Yeah, so I've talked about our advocacy in the rate hearings with the Nova Scotia Power's collections policy. So for instance, it used to be that they would tell people if they got into arrears and they were close to being disconnected, they were told that they had to repay, work out an arrangement to repay in 6 months, which meant that the repayments were quite high for people that high arrears. And they changed it to 12 months and in some cases 24 months back in 2013. And so and there were various other changes made too, but that was just to make it more practical and sort of feasible for people to repay their arrears. And in these negotiations in the last year, we've been looking at how well that worked and what kind of changes need to be made. So there's some changes. For instance, one example is in Nova Scotia, if you're about to be disconnected and you use your electricity for for medical equipment that is necessary for you to stay alive, they give you, I think, I should know the figures, but it's something like a 2-week period to figure it out and avoid the disconnection. In Ontario, it's a month, and so they've extended it, and they're going to extend it in Nova Scotia too, so people have longer. If they're in that situation, they have longer to figure out how to get their bills paid so that they don't get disconnected. And as I said earlier, there's going to be an annual report now on how many people are in arrears and how long their arrears are and that kind of thing. So we can see if things are changing. So that's gone through what we're about and what kind of help we've been able to provide people and what we're still hoping to provide in future. And these are contact ways of contacting Efficiency Nova Scotia about their various programs, and you're going to hear more about them next week, so you may not even want to take them down now, but I wasn't quite clear that was happening next week, so I thought I'd list those there. But there are a lot of very, very good efficiency programs, and some of them are targeted at low-income households, which we really appreciate. And yeah. So that's all I have to say. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be very happy to answer them.
I don't think this works really. I just wanted to mention though, that actually in this last weekend's Herald, the newspaper, it had a bit of information where they said at present there are 2,600 plus, probably closer to 2,700 people presently cut off from Nova Scotia Power because they couldn't keep up with their light bills, or heating bills. So there's going to be a lot of cold people this winter.
Yeah, I was interviewed for that article, so you'll if you go back and look at it, you'll see that I was one of the people interviewed. But that figure is I think it's over 2,800, and that's how many people were disconnected over the last year. Many of them have been reconnected. Most of them have been reconnected. So what happens is when you're disconnected, it's a big shock. And it creates all kinds of chaos in your life, and you do whatever you can to get it reconnected, and you get help from all kinds of different sources until finally you work it out in most cases. one of the things that we're trying to get clearer information on is how long people are disconnected for on average. And I don't have that figure in my head, but that figure of 2,800 was something that was important for us to find out, and it will be published now every year in this annual report. They said that in the previous 3 years during the pandemic, the number went down somewhat because there were so many extra supports available. But previous to the pandemic, the average was around 3,000. So this is similar to what the average has been. What we would like to see, if you have this program we're talking about, where you get a subsidy on low-income households' energy bills every as a standard systematic thing, that number would go down quite a bit. And that's one of the things in working with Nova Scotia Power and doing the research on what the options are for Nova Scotia. They said that they had talked to their colleagues in utilities in Ontario, where they have a program like that, and that they said the amount of disconnections did go down quite dramatically. So that's one of the ways of preventing that. The way it works here is they're not allowed to disconnect if the temperature is going to be below a certain figure in the next week. And they also have, which I thought was very interesting to hear and very good to hear, they have a similar rule in the summer that if it's going to be higher than a certain amount in the next week, they won't disconnect, so that people have access to air conditioning, say. So it's not like a blanket thing, but generally speaking, disconnections stop happening between November and March, and then they start happening again in April. There was another question here, I think.
Yes, I was wondering which program is specifically earmarked for seniors? You talked about one, seniors grant or something.
Yeah,
there's here on your reference at the end.
No, it's called. I think this is fairly new. I think last year may have been the first year it existed. It's called the Seniors Care Grant, and it's income qualified. I don't know what the income level is. It's $700 up to, or maybe a flat rate of $750. This is relatively new to me also. Any other questions? For those who have used the Heating Assistance Rebate Program, or HARP, which was raised to $1,000 last year, they're going to announce this year's, that was only raised for 1 year. They're going to announce the new amount probably next week. Yeah, it's the 16th or so, I've been told. Yeah, any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. Really appreciate your interest and being able to talk to you.